Ma, you have to go, now. The poor waitress stopped a billionaire mom moments before a $200 deal. What if a stranger's courage was the only thing standing between you and tragedy? What if you had the power to save someone who'd never know how much they'd cost you? Would you do it? Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Before we begin, I've just one question for you. Please tell me in the comments, would you step in if it meant risking your own job or comfort to save a stranger? Have you done it before? If you haven't before, you might want to listen to this story carefully. Now let us begin. In the private dining room of Chicago's most exclusive restaurant, 60-year-old Cassandra Humphrey smoothed the lapels of her vintage Chanel suit one last time before the evening that would crown her son's career. The merger contract sat in Gabriel's sleek leather portfolio, each signature line worth millions. She'd built an empire from inheritance, transforming her father's modest pharmaceutical company into a medical research powerhouse that revolutionized patient care across 3 continents. Tonight, Gabriel would step out of her shadow with a $200 million acquisition that would secure both their legacies. The European investors would arrive any minute, ready to finalize the deal that had taken 8 years to orchestrate. Cassandra had witnessed every negotiation, advised on every strategy, prepared for every contingency. What she couldn't have anticipated was the young black woman in a server's uniform who would approach her table with trembling hands and speak the words that would save her life. Her name tag read Linda, and her eyes held a pain that Cassandra would soon understand. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Linda Gray had been working at the restaurant for exactly 5 weeks, and she still felt like an intruder among the elegant servers who moved through the dining room like dancers in a choreographed ballet. At 21, she was younger than most staff but carried a weariness that aged her beyond her years. After her grandmother's death 6 months ago left her drowning in medical bills and grief, she needed this job desperately. The opulent dining room intimidated her with its crystal chandeliers casting amber light over hushed conversations of Chicago's elite, the scent of truffle and aged wine hanging in the air like expensive perfume. But she was determined to prove herself worthy of serving here. Tonight felt heavier than usual, though. The maitre d' had assigned her to the private dining section where pharmaceutical royalty and European investors would seal historic deals. The Humphrey party. This is a crucial evening, he'd instructed, adjusting his pristine bow tie with practiced precision. No mistakes tonight. Linda nodded, checking her reflection in the polished silver service station. Her hands still shook slightly when she carried the heavy trays laden with courses that cost more than her weekly rent, but she was getting steadier each shift. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Carry yourself with dignity, baby. We're just as worthy as anyone." Linda straightened her shoulders, smoothed her apron, and stepped into the dining room. She watched Cassandra Humphrey enter with the quiet command of someone who'd never questioned her place in any room. Her vintage suit fit like it had been tailored to her body decades ago and preserved perfectly, and she moved with the purposeful grace of someone who'd built kingdoms, while others built careers. Linda had seen her photograph in business journals during those long nights in the hospital, sitting beside her grandmother's bed. The pharmaceutical matriarch who'd revolutionized cancer research before her 60th birthday. Tonight she carried herself like a woman on the verge of witnessing her greatest victory. As Linda set the champagne flutes at the table, she caught Cassandra's phone conversation with her son. "The contracts are flawless, darling," she was saying, her voice carrying the warm authority of someone accustomed to shaping destinies. "By midnight, Gabriel, you'll have secured the deal of the century." Linda's grip tightened on the serving tray. The name hung in the air like smoke. Humphrey Biotech. The company that had closed Mercy Community Clinic. The corporation whose cost-cutting decisions had sealed her grandmother's fate. Linda's grip tightened on the serving tray. The name hung in the air like smoke. Humphrey Biotech. The company that had closed Mercy Community Clinic. the corporation whose cost-cutting decisions had sealed her grandmother's fate. Before she could retreat into the safety of the kitchen, the restaurant's grand entrance doors swept open, and Gabriel Humphrey arrived with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been denied entry anywhere. He was flanked by 3 European investors in impeccably tailored suits, their conversation animated with the excitement of men about to reshape an industry. At 35, Gabriel possessed the kind of charisma that filled rooms: broad shoulders, warm smile, the commanding presence of someone who'd turned his mother's pharmaceutical empire into something even more formidable. Cassandra rose from her seat, and Linda watched the transformation. The billionaire matriarch's stern expression melted into pure maternal pride as her son approached. Gabriel kissed his mother's cheek, and she reached up to straighten his already perfect tie, her fingers gentle against the silk. "My brilliant boy," Cassandra murmured, loud enough for Linda to hear as she refreshed the water glasses. "Tonight you make history on your own terms." "We make history, Mother," Gabriel corrected, his hand covering hers. "Everything I'm started with you." The tenderness between them caught Linda off guard. She'd spent 6 months imagining the Humphreys as faceless corporate villains, but watching Cassandra's eyes shine with pride, seeing Gabriel's genuine affection for his mother, it complicated the narrative she'd constructed. These were people, flawed perhaps, but capable of love. Linda moved through her service routine mechanically, setting down bread plates and pouring water while the investors settled into their seats. Gabriel pulled out his phone, stepping away briefly to take a call. "Yes, the contracts are being couriered now," he said, pacing near the window overlooking Michigan Avenue. "This merger will change pharmaceutical research forever. We're talking about funding for treatments that major corporations won't touch because they're not profitable enough." His voice carried genuine passion. "That's what separates Humphrey Biotech. We put patients before profit margins." Linda nearly dropped the bread basket. Patients before profit margins. The irony burned. Was that what they'd told themselves when they closed 14 community clinics? When they'd left neighborhoods like hers without accessible health care? As Gabriel returned to the table, Cassandra touched his arm. "Darling, you left your emergency bag in the car again." "I'm fine, Mother." "Just like your mother, always prepared until you're not," Cassandra said with mock severity. "Your EpiPen is in the car. Yes, I don't need it at dinner." Gabriel laughed, kissing her forehead. "Stop worrying." Linda felt ice slide down her spine at the mention of an EpiPen, though she couldn't say why. She gathered the empty champagne flutes and retreated toward the kitchen, her heart hammering against her ribs. The kitchen was controlled chaos. Flames leaped from sauté pans while sous chefs shouted orders over the clatter of stainless steel. The air smelled of searing meat, butter, and the sharp tang of reduction sauces. Linda navigated through the narrow spaces between stations, heading for the appetizer line where orders for her section waited. Near the prep area, she caught the tail end of a rushed conversation. The day shift chef, Mark, was pulling off his apron while briefing the evening chef, Dominique. "My daughter's got a fever. I need to get to the hospital. The Humphrey table, section 12. I've got it, Dominique interrupted, already reaching for the tickets. "Go take care of your kid." Mark disappeared through the back exit, and Linda watched Dominique scan the orders with increasing stress. 3 VIP tables needed appetizers simultaneously, and the kitchen was already behind schedule. Dominique began plating with fierce concentration, assembling microgreens and edible flowers with tweezers, drizzling sauces in perfect spirals. Linda picked up the water pitcher to refill it, glancing at the preparations. Something caught her eye. A small bottle near Cassandra's appetizer plate. The label read, "Premium Walnut Oil." Her breath stopped. Walnut oil. For a salad going to Cassandra Humphrey's table. Linda set down the pitcher and moved closer, watching Dominique whisk the walnut oil into a vinaigrette. The golden liquid swirled hypnotically, beautiful and deadly. Linda's hands began to shake. She pulled out the reservation tablet mounted near the expo station, scrolling frantically through the evening's VIP notes. There, Cassandra Humphrey's profile. Severe nut allergy, no exceptions. Anaphylaxis risk, no tree nuts, no peanuts, no cross-contamination. Chef Dominique, Linda said, her voice barely audible over the kitchen noise. The chef didn't look up, focused on his plating. Not now, Linda. Chef, the Humphrey table, there's a mistake. Day shift already confirmed everything. I'm following the prep notes. Linda moved closer, holding up the tablet. The reservation says severe nut allergy. That's walnut oil. Dominique's hands froze mid-whisk. His eyes darted from the oil bottle to the tablet, then back to the nearly completed appetizer. Merde. The word came out as a whisper. Within seconds, the sous chef rushed over. The expo chef joined them. Linda watched their faces drain of color as they confirmed what she'd discovered. Mark had forgotten to note the allergy modification during the rushed handover. The appetizer was 90% complete, the walnut vinaigrette already drizzled across the organic greens. In 3 minutes, it would have been served. The kitchen fell into controlled panic. Dominique scraped the plate into the waste bin while calling for fresh ingredients. The sous chef was already pulling up protocols for allergen contamination. The head chef emerged from his office, demanding to know how this had happened. Linda stood at the edge of the chaos, staring at the discarded salad in the trash. The walnut oil glistened on the greens, innocent-looking. Deadly. Her mind spiraled backward. She saw her grandmother's hospital bed, the monitors beeping their steady rhythm while Helen's chest rose and fell with increasing difficulty. She remembered the oncologist's words. If we'd caught it 6 months earlier, the prognosis would have been very different. 6 months. The exact amount of time between Mercy Community Clinic's closure and Helen's diagnosis at a clinic 40 minutes away. Too far for regular checkups, too expensive without insurance. Helen's voice echoed in her memory, weak but firm in those final days. Baby, bitterness only poisons the person carrying it. If you were in Linda's shoes right now, what would you do? Would you stay silent or speak up and risk everything? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what kind of courage you believe in. Don't let anger eat you alive. Promise me. Linda had promised. But standing here, watching the kitchen scramble to fix a mistake that would have killed Cassandra Humphrey, she felt temptation curl around her thoughts like smoke. She could stay silent. The kitchen was already in chaos. Who would notice if she didn't mention what she'd seen? The appetizer could be replated, served without anyone knowing. Cassandra would eat. The reaction would come fast. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it might be too late. Gabriel's words floated back to her. We put patience before profit margins. But they hadn't. They'd closed Mercy. They'd closed 13 other clinics in neighborhoods they deemed unprofitable. Her grandmother had been a patient and they'd chosen profits over her access to care. Linda's hands trembled as another memory surfaced. Helen, in her nurse's uniform, coming home exhausted but smiling. Treated a little boy today who'd been running a fever for 3 days, she'd said, kicking off her shoes. His mama couldn't afford the urgent care copay. But at Mercy, we don't turn anyone away. That's what healthcare should be, baby. Healing people, not bank accounts. Helen had spent 40 years caring for patients regardless of their ability to pay. She'd believed in Mercy. The clinic's name had been more than just a word to her. It had been a calling. And when she'd needed Mercy herself, those clinic doors had been locked. Permanently. Linda looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. 7:47 p.m. In the dining room, Gabriel and Cassandra would be toasting with the investors, champagne catching the light. The new appetizer would be plated in 3 minutes. The kitchen had caught the error. Linda could return to her section, finish her shift, and go home. No one would ever know she'd wrestled with the darkness of letting tragedy unfold. But she would know. Her grandmother's voice came again, clearer now. Baby, bitterness only poisons the person carrying it. Linda's hands steadied. She removed her order pad from her apron pocket and took a deep breath. This wasn't about Humphrey Biotech. This wasn't about revenge or justice or evening scores. This was about choosing who she wanted to be in the world. The kitchen had caught the error, but what if they hadn't? What if she'd been the only one who'd noticed? She moved toward the kitchen exit, but the maitre d' intercepted her at the door. "Linda, your section needs water refills. The Humphrey table." "I need to speak to Mrs. Humphrey right now," Linda said, her voice surprisingly calm. "The investors are toasting. You cannot interrupt. There's something she needs to know about her appetizer. It's urgent." The maitre d's expression hardened. "Linda, you're still on probation. If you disrupt a VIP dinner without proper authorization..." "This is life or death," Linda said, meeting his eyes. "And if something happens to that woman because I stayed silent, I'll never forgive myself." She pushed past him into the dining room. The chandeliers seemed too bright, the air too thick. Through the archway, she could see Cassandra raising her champagne flute, laughing at something one of the investors said. Gabriel had his arm around his mother's shoulders, his expression radiant with success. Linda's heart hammered against her ribs as she walked forward. Every step felt like crossing an ocean. Her grandmother's face filled her mind, not dying in a hospital bed but alive, vibrant, teaching Linda to braid her hair in their tiny Southside apartment kitchen. Helen had taught her so many things: how to make mac and cheese stretch for 3 days, how to stand tall when the world tried to make you small, how to choose compassion even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. Linda reached the edge of the private dining area. Cassandra's appetizer sat waiting at the server station, the new one prepared without the walnut oil. But Cassandra didn't know about the mistake. She didn't know how close she'd come. And sitting in her car, useless, was the EpiPen that might not have reached her in time. Linda took one more breath, then walked directly toward Cassandra's table, where the woman was mid-toast, champagne flute catching the amber light. This choice would change everything, but it was the only choice Linda could live with. Linda arrived at the table just as Gabriel raised his champagne flute, mid-sentence about revolutionary partnerships and changing the future of pharmaceutical research. The European investors leaned forward, captivated. Cassandra's smile was radiant. "Ma, you have to go, now." Linda's voice cut through the toast like a knife. "Don't eat anything." The table fell silent. Every head turned toward her. Linda's chest heaved, her hands shaking so violently she had to clasp them together to keep them still. Cassandra's expression froze into icy confusion. "Excuse me?" Gabriel's face flushed with immediate anger. He set down his champagne flute with controlled precision, his voice sharp. "What is the meaning of this? Do you have any idea?" "The kitchen made a mistake with your appetizer," Linda said, the words tumbling out breathless and urgent. "There's walnut oil. Your allergy." She looked directly at Cassandra. "You can't eat it. You can't." Cassandra's face drained of color. Her hand moved instinctively to her throat. Would you have had the courage to interrupt the most powerful people in the room? Drop your thoughts below, because moments like this reveal who we truly are when no one's watching. Gabriel's expression shifted from fury to alarm in a heartbeat. "What did you say?" The maitre d' materialized at Linda's elbow, his face crimson with mortification. "Mrs. Humphrey, Mr. Humphrey, I am so terribly sorry. This server is new and clearly doesn't understand." "Check the kitchen," Linda said, standing her ground even as the maitre d' gripped her arm. "Check the preparation notes versus what was made. There was a shift-change miscommunication. The day chef didn't pass along the allergy information. They used walnut oil in the vinaigrette." "That's impossible," the maitre d' said. "Our protocols..." "Please," Linda begged, looking at Cassandra. "Just check." The restaurant manager appeared, drawn by the commotion. Gabriel stood, his entire demeanor transformed. "Check it. Now." The manager rushed toward the kitchen. The seconds stretched like hours. The investors exchanged uncertain glances. Cassandra sat frozen, her champagne forgotten, one hand still pressed against her throat. The manager returned ashen-faced, the head chef behind him. "Mr. Humphrey, I'm afraid there was an error. The day shift chef had a family emergency and didn't complete the allergen briefing. The evening chef followed the standard preparation, which included walnut oil. His voice cracked. We caught it just minutes ago, but if this young woman hadn't... Cassandra's hand went to her mouth. She looked at the empty space where her appetizer would have been placed. Oh my God. How concentrated was the oil? Gabriel demanded. The head chef stepped forward, his face grave. High concentration, sir. The reaction would have been severe and immediate. Anaphylactic shock within minutes. The hospital is 12 minutes away, the manager added quietly. Gabriel turned to his mother. Your EpiPen. In the car, Cassandra whispered. You know I always forget to bring it inside. The full weight of what almost happened settled over the table like a shroud. Gabriel had been planning to step into the private room for the contract signing. He would have been 40 feet away behind closed doors, finalizing the deal of his career while his mother's throat closed. By the time anyone noticed her distress, by the time they called for help, by the time someone retrieved the EpiPen from her car, stunned silence gripped the table. Even the investors, who'd been strangers to this drama moments ago, sat motionless with the understanding that they'd just witnessed a narrow escape from tragedy. Gabriel moved toward Linda, his earlier anger completely dissolved. How did you know? Who are you? Linda Gray, sir. Her voice was barely a whisper now, all the adrenaline draining away and leaving her hollow. Cassandra stood on unsteady legs, reaching out to steady herself on the table. When she spoke, her voice had lost all its imperial authority, replaced with raw vulnerability. Linda, you've given me my life. Gabriel studied Linda's face more carefully now, her exhausted eyes, her trembling hands, the weight she carried. What made you notice the mistake? How did you even know to check? Linda's voice broke. I lost someone because they couldn't get the medical care they needed in time. I won't let that happen to anyone else, even... She stopped herself, the words "even you" dying on her tongue. But Cassandra saw it. The pain that flashed across Linda's face spoke volumes. Even us. Cassandra finished softly. Even strangers. One of the European investors stood, his accent thick with emotion. Young lady, what you did took extraordinary courage. Gabriel's expression shifted to something Linda couldn't quite read, curiosity mixed with dawning realization. Your grandmother raised you? He asked gently, remembering Linda's earlier words. She worked as a nurse? Linda nodded, fighting tears. Where? Linda hesitated, knowing this revelation would change everything, but she'd already crossed the line between silence and truth. Mercy Community Clinic, before it closed. Recognition flashed across Gabriel's face like lightning. His mouth opened, then closed. He exchanged a long look with his mother, whose eyes had widened with understanding. I should get back to work, Linda said quickly, stepping backward. I'm glad you're safe. She turned and fled toward the kitchen, her vision blurring with tears she'd been holding back. Behind her, she heard Gabriel call out, but she couldn't stop. Couldn't face them. Couldn't process what she'd just done. In the dining room, Gabriel stood motionless, watching the kitchen doors swing shut behind Linda. The European investors were speaking to him, probably asking questions, but their voices sounded distant. He looked at his mother, saw his own shock mirrored in her face. Cancel the dinner, Gabriel said suddenly. Reschedule for next week. Gabriel, one of the investors began. Please, I need to understand what just happened here. Gabriel turned to the investors, his voice sincere. What we witnessed tonight, it matters more than any contract. I'll call you tomorrow. The investors, moved by the evening's drama, nodded their agreement. As they gathered their belongings, Gabriel turned to the restaurant manager. I need Linda Gray's employment file. Everything you have on her. Within minutes, Gabriel sat in the private room with his mother and his assistant, scrolling through information on a tablet. Full name, Linda Gray. Age, 21. Address, Southside Chicago. Emergency contact, none listed. Under employment history, a note. Grandmother Helen Gray deceased, primary guardian. Gabriel's assistant, anticipating his next question, pulled up medical records. Helen Gray worked as a nurse at Mercy Community Clinic for 40 years. Diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer 8 months ago. Passed away 6 months ago. Gabriel's hands tightened on the tablet. Pull up the timeline of Mercy's closure. The dates appeared. Mercy Community Clinic closed 14 months ago. Helen Gray's cancer diagnosis came 8 months ago, 6 months after losing access to her workplace healthcare network. Medical notes indicate the cancer was advanced at diagnosis, his assistant read. The oncologist's report suggests it would have been treatable if caught earlier. She'd missed regular screenings due to inability to afford specialists after clinic closure. Gabriel felt something crack inside his chest. He scrolled through more records. 14 community clinics closed. Cost-cutting measures his CFO had recommended. Unprofitable locations, the reports had said. Gabriel had signed off without question, trusting the numbers, never asking about the faces behind them. Cassandra placed her hand on her son's shoulder. She'd been watching his expression transform, seeing him age years in minutes. "That young woman," Cassandra said quietly, "saved my life tonight. After She couldn't finish the sentence. Gabriel looked toward the kitchen, where Linda had disappeared. His voice, when he spoke, carried a weight it hadn't held before. "I need to make this right." 6 months later, Linda stood in front of the mirror in her new office, adjusting the collar of her navy blazer for the 3rd time. At 22, she still felt like she was playing dress-up in professional attire, but the title on her door, Community Outreach Director, was real. The entire transformation felt surreal. Outside her window, the South Side neighborhood hummed with an energy it hadn't possessed in years. Where Mercy Community Clinic had once stood, its doors locked, windows dark with abandonment, now rose the Helen Gray Memorial Community Health Network. The building had been expanded, modernized with floor-to-ceiling windows that let natural light flood the waiting rooms, but they'd preserved the original brick facade that Helen had walked past for 40 years. The old structure wrapped around the new like a grandmother's arms. Linda checked her watch. The ribbon-cutting ceremony would begin in 20 minutes. Community members were already gathering on the front lawn, former Mercy patients, neighborhood families, local leaders. She'd given speeches before, small ones at community college, but this felt different. This was her grandmother's legacy being honored. "Linda?" Her assistant poked her head through the door. "There are 2 people here asking for you. They say they knew your grandmother." Linda's stomach tightened. Half the neighborhood had known Helen. "Send them to the ceremony area. I'll greet everyone together. They're insisting on seeing you privately first." Her assistant's expression was unreadable. "It's Cassandra and Gabriel Humphrey." Linda's breath caught. She hadn't seen them since that night at the restaurant. The job offer had come through official channels, an HR representative, professional emails, contracts to sign. She'd accepted because the salary would change her life, because the position honored everything Helen had believed in. But she'd assumed the Humphreys had moved on, their guilt absolved by writing checks. "Send them in," Linda heard herself say. Cassandra entered first, and Linda was struck by how different she looked. The imperial confidence had been replaced with something softer. She wore a simple dress suit, her pearl earrings still elegant but no longer armor. Gabriel followed, and Linda saw immediately that he'd changed too. The corporate sheen had been tempered by something that looked like humility. "Linda," Cassandra said, her voice gentle. "Thank you for seeing us." "Of course." Linda's professional training kicked in. "Would you like to sit?" "Before the ceremony, we wanted to give you something," Gabriel interrupted. He glanced at his mother, who nodded and stepped forward, carrying something wrapped in navy cloth. Cassandra's hands trembled as she unwrapped it. Inside was a frame, and when Linda saw the photograph, her knees nearly gave out. Helen, young, maybe 35, wearing her nurse's uniform, standing in front of Mercy Community Clinic's original entrance. 1995, according to the date stamp. Her grandmother's smile was radiant, her eyes bright with purpose. Linda had never seen this photo. "Your grandmother spent 40 years saving lives in these communities," Cassandra said, her voice breaking. "Because you saved mine, we're making sure her legacy continues." Gabriel stepped forward. "Linda, that night, what you did taught me something I should have learned years ago. You taught me that true leadership means seeing the faces behind every business decision." He took a breath. "We closed 14 community clinics. 14 neighborhoods lost access to health care because I trusted profit projections without questioning the human cost. All 14 clinics are being rebuilt," Cassandra added, "expanded and modernized, and every single one will bear your grandmother's name, the Helen Gray Memorial Community Health Network." Linda couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at the photograph, at her grandmother's smile, at the promise of healing that was spreading across the city. "We can't bring her back," Gabriel said quietly. "We can't undo the harm our decisions caused, but we can honor her memory by making sure no one else suffers what she suffered." Linda finally found her voice. She would have loved this. All of it. Not for herself, but for the communities that needed it most. Cassandra moved forward and pulled Linda into an embrace. It felt like being held by a grandmother. Warm, secure, unconditional. Two women from completely different worlds, united by the understanding that compassion could transcend any barrier society built between people. "Your grandmother raised you to be extraordinary," Cassandra whispered against Linda's hair. "I see her in everything you do." When they separated, Gabriel was smiling. "We discovered something else about you. The scholarship program you started with your salary. 5 students already pursuing healthcare careers." Linda blushed. "It's not much." "It's everything," Gabriel interrupted. "And we're matching your contributions tenfold, expanding the program citywide. If you're going to heal broken systems, you need more people who understand what you understand." Outside, the ceremony was beginning. Linda walked between Cassandra and Gabriel toward the stage, clutching the framed photograph of her grandmother. The lawn was packed with people, hundreds of faces from the neighborhood, many Linda recognized from Helen's funeral. They'd come to celebrate the return of something they'd lost. Linda gave her speech, her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. "My grandmother taught me that healing broken systems requires becoming part of the solution. She believed healthcare was a human right, not a privilege. She lived that belief every single day." Cassandra spoke next, acknowledging Humphrey Biotech's failures, promising transparency and community input for future decisions. There was power in her admission, a billionaire matriarch admitting her family's corporation had caused harm. Then Gabriel announced the funding commitment, $50 million over 10 years, ensuring the Helen Gray Memorial Community Health Network would thrive for decades. The ribbon cutting was a community affair. Linda, Cassandra, Gabriel, and 3 neighborhood elders held the scissors together. When the ribbon fell, the crowd erupted in applause. After the ceremony, Linda showed them through the clinic's main hall. One wall displayed photographs of healthcare workers who'd served the South Side over the years. Helen's face appeared in a dozen pictures, young, middle-aged, elderly, always smiling, always surrounded by the people she'd cared for. "Are you still in school?" Gabriel asked as they studied the wall. "Finishing my nursing degree," Linda said. "I'll graduate next spring." Cassandra touched her arm. "Your grandmother would want you to reach your full potential. If you need mentorship, guidance, anything, I'd be honored to help." Linda looked at these 2 people who'd been strangers 6 months ago, who'd represented everything she'd resented, who'd become something she'd never expected, allies in healing. That evening, after the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, Linda stood outside the clinic watching the sunset paint the building gold. Her grandmother's name gleamed on the sign above the entrance, Helen Gray Memorial Community Health Network. Her phone buzzed with a voice message from Keisha, one of the scholarship students. Linda, I just finished my first clinical rotation. I thought about your grandmother the whole time, about how she made people feel safe. I want to do that too. Thank you for making this possible. Linda smiled through fresh tears. She thought about that terrifying moment in the restaurant, her hands shaking as she approached Cassandra's table. She'd had every reason to stay silent, every justification for letting fate take its course. But she'd chosen differently. Grandma, Linda whispered to the darkening sky, I kept my promise. I chose compassion over bitterness. And look what grew from that choice. She entered the clinic for her evening shift, ready to serve her community just as Helen once had. The waiting room was already filling with patients, families who'd waited months for this clinic to reopen, people who'd traveled miles for affordable care, children who needed vaccines, and elders who needed monitoring. Linda put on her name tag and smiled at the first family. Behind her, Helen's photograph watched from the wall, eternal and proud. Sometimes choosing kindness when you have every reason to choose revenge doesn't just heal one heart. It heals entire communities. What do you think? Does compassion still have power in today's world? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one of them.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.